be a very good time to take a break. I propose that we take a break until 10:20. So we'll take a pause for now. Just waiting for a couple more to join us so we get a quorum. Right, we've got our quorum. Yeah, welcome back after that break. Welcome back to Amy and Charlie, our youth counsellors. Right, back to return to the matter. The agenda matter is Waimea Road and Hendon Street closure. Councillor Rohan Anil Stevens.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Move, is that option one?
Option one.
Okay then, it's been moved. I'm happy to second. Madam Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I've just got a question for Margaret, just in terms of the engagement process. Do I take it that the matter that is being raised with the residents it's not so much about how this works, because we know quite a lot about that already, so we've kind of got that, but it's the issue of whether we would use the formal road stopping procedure or the section 319 process to do this work. Is that the fundamental issue where you feel the gap is?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. So it's asking them specifically about the mechanism of closure and the long-term prevention of vehicles through this intersection as opposed to road stopping.
Okay, so if in fact, and so I suppose this is the question that I have, if we have good reason why we would not use the road stopping mechanism, and we know that we've got through trying to improve our transport system, we know that we've got potential changes that would occur in that vicinity. We're talking about increasing our bus services and we need bus stops and all sorts of things. So I think we're unlikely to give away road at this point because it may have future uses. Then I'm not sure it's, I guess I'm wondering how are we going to genuinely put that up as an option for the community? Because I would have thought that the officer advice would be exactly that no, you would not support road stopping, and I would have thought there'll be other parties that would oppose that as well, Waka Kotahi being one. So I'm just still a bit concerned that we're going out to ask the community about something that isn't genuinely an option. Because to be honest, it looks to me as though you've settled on absolutely the appropriate thing with what you're doing, and that really the input that would be very helpful would be actually around the concept plans and what all of this looks like. Because I'm not taking it from what we've got that there's any particular likelihood that we're going to remove the whole thing and just put the road back how it was. I think we've heard enough from you on that the case has been, there's a good case there for safety improvements to keep it there. And I'm sorry, I'm talking right, so I'm not sure I can make that the question. I'm going, have I got that about right, Margaret? So,
I think you're asking me, what are we going to ask the public?
that's it, yeah.
Yeah. So if we to go out with concept plans, it'll take us a little longer to get those drafted up. But we could go out and say, I mean, there is an opportunity for some placemaking here. So part of our engagement could be, what does placemaking look like here for you? We feel it's really important that the curb and channel, it's not footpath with what we know as curb and channel. We're getting into detail here, but it's got to be able to be traversed by cyclists because this is an active transport corridor. So we could ask some questions around that, as well as the fact that this is long-term vehicular closure. So planters, perhaps not wooden planters, but permanent planters. So that's a round of engagement, but that'll take a little longer than me being able to bring a report back to you in the next month or two. So
all right, so I'm just looking at the report on page 21, at section 10.2, and it says the consultation will include a concept plan drawing and questionnaire. That's what drew me to that one. So,
and we can do that, but it means it's most likely that we will not have this back to you in March. It would be June.
okay, but essentially the decision, still the underlying decision is we have to do something to allow those concept plans to come to fruition. There's a step for us to do. And the question I've got in my head today is, would I contemplate, even if I got feedback from the community to say, we want you to use the permanent road stopping provisions rather than section 319, would I contemplate using the road stopping provisions? And I guess my concern is that I would think that would be counter to other decisions of council in relation to the need to have a flexible roading network around that, particularly around that high volume, high priority road for public transport. So I just need to go and have a think about that. And it's not the dilemma. I think you're going to. The project is really good. I think the intention is we need to get this done. It's just it's kind of, Mr. Chair, that issue of consultation needs to be around genuine options, and if one of them is actually got no chance of getting a decision at the table or even an officer report to support road stopping, then I'm a little bit uncomfortable about taking the community down that pathway.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Well, I've got Councillor Skinner, then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you. I've got no questions. Ready hand up for participate in the debate.
Okay, we'll just hold the debate. I'll just check if we've got any more questions of the officers before we move into debate. No, you got a question, Councillor Edgar?
Yes. Yep, my hand up was for a question.
Yep.
We're still in questions, aren't we?
Yes, we're still on
Yep.
questions.
Okay, fantastic. So do we need to, when we've worked with the community previously on co-design or feedback on things we want to do, you don't have to do it as part of an engagement process. And couldn't you decide today to go ahead, option 2, and then get community input on the design and on any further concerns? Because surely we're always open to hearing concerns about our roading network and footpath network from people anyway. So could that process not be part of this is what we're going to be doing? It's still not a permanent closure, so that hasn't changed from what we previously told you. But we're going to be looking at these long-term options, and let's work on that together, and let's see any other concerns we need to keep addressing. So, what is the requirement or the need to do engagement first rather than as part of a subsequent co-design process or supportive process?
Through the chair, I think this comes back to the discussion that we had earlier around the risk of us not going out before making the decision to close this intersection to vehicular traffic in the long term. Not going out for that final round. I think it goes back to that.
Okay, so then coming back to point Mayor Rees made, it's previously been alluded that it would be a couple of weeks of engagement and we could sign this off in 6 weeks. But as noted, 10.2 says the consultation will include a concept plan drawing and a questionnaire, and it will be distributed via, letterbox drop, which feels, so everyone within that map you attached is going to get a concept plan and a questionnaire. Is that correct?
That would be our intention on the concept plan. It might be a starting point for that ongoing engagement that you alluded to in terms of what does it actually look like, but we still need to get that, and we'd have to put a date in to say this is the intention is to use this mechanism to close it in the long term, so they get their say about that, and then we would invite ongoing discussion around what the placemaking aspect of it looks like, the co-design aspect of it.
And you can do all of that inside of 2 weeks to bring this back to the next infrastructure.
So I have to caveat that. I mean, I said optimistically, and I think I have to acknowledge that there are a lot of things out of our control at the moment, and certainly the COVID outbreak is one of them. I mean, this requires staff time, and we expect staff to be isolating. Most people can work from home. I'm one of them at the moment, but if they get sick, then that will slow things down. So I wouldn't want to promise, cross my heart that we'll have this back to you on the 31st of March, because there are some things that are out of our control. We will go as fast as we can.
Okay. All right, any more questions? Okay, no more questions. We'll move into debate. The resolution is as per the recommendation moved by Councillor O'Neill-Stevens. I've seconded it, so open for debate. Got Councillor Laurie, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens, Councillor Skinner and Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I've been listening to all these discussions, and what keeps coming back to me is that just about everything that council does carries some legal risk. We have done a 29-month trial of this closure, and we know it is doing a great job of keeping people safe. It's doing a particularly good job of keeping Nelson Whakatu's children safe. We have asked the public what they think about this not once but twice. We have the support of the AA, the police, Nelsust, Bicycle Nelson Bays, FENS, St John Ambulance, and the Nelson Marlborough DHB. We are not required, as we've heard, to do a special consultative procedure. If you make mode shift or creating a sustainable transport system a priority of your term of council, I think you should prioritise it. Actually making the decision today about the future of this road would be doing that. It would be prioritising mode shift and creating a sustainable transport system. Nelson City Council, as we all know, is constantly accused of being overly risk adverse and for taking too long to get on with stuff. This, unfortunately, today is an example of Nelson City Council being too risk adverse and taking too long to get on with stuff, which is why I'm going to vote against the recommendation.
All right, speaking against. Next on the list, I have Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'm speaking in favour of this resolution today. Look, the closure has had undoubted benefits for the safety of those who use that part of our transport network, and has been a clear improvement. And I want to acknowledge that there is I think, a broadly shared view amongst councillors that ideally we would be able to sign this off today. But to quote the ever iconic George Michael, who I've quoted before, if you're going to do it right. I think realistically, on the ground, this decision changes nothing either way. Whether it's option 1 or option 2, that road will be staying closed. The people using that area will continue to see its function as it has. There isn't a delay to the improvements. As we've noted, the improvements have been in for 29 months and they have not left, because we've seen the clear data to show that it is a safety improvement. But and it is a little frustrating, and I'll be the first to admit that. But what going out for this final round of engagement does is, one, it really solidifies our position, and at very little cost. Yes, there's some staff work, but I think there's also benefit in doing it, and that we have another opportunity to better understand the wider network impacts and potentially continue to adjust and make any further changes that may be necessary to account for flow-on effects. It's also an opportunity to hear from the community about other aspirations they have for this area and what they'd like to see in this permanent closure. I think this process has provided a whole lot of learnings, and I'm sure staff will be taking those forward, because it shouldn't take 4 reports to see us from trial to the finalization of these things. And I know that staff have discovered learnings and knowing what mechanisms are available to us to achieve these changes. And what that's going to mean is that realistically in the future, we'll be able to do these things faster. But in pushing ahead now, we just open ourselves up to unnecessary risk that actually provides no short-term or long-term benefit. I think that, and having heard the discussion today, there's a good chance that the outcome will be the same regardless. There's also been a bit of discussion about this idea of sort of permanent versus long-term, and the roads stopping versus using other parts in terms of shifting it to be a footpath or cycleway. And just on that, I really reflect. When I'm walking down a footpath, I don't think to myself, when will this become another lane of traffic? Although under these same powers, it's just as possible, because the reality is it's always up to decisions of council on whether or not to change things. And even with road stopping, there is nothing truly irreversible in this space. We can always change our mind. And so I don't think that it's particularly relevant as to what mechanism we ultimately end up using, because no matter what, councils can change and they can change their minds. But I think that in this case, when you've got such a solid base of evidence and community support, that's realistically not going to happen. And so I just want to really thank the community, and I know myself and Brian have been down and done some face-to-face engagement when we could, for their continued support and engagement on this, and their really insightful feedback that's enabled us to make this closure work and to respond effectively to the flow-on impacts that we've seen. So a massive thank you to the community, and I'm happy to support this today, as it's not delaying anything, but what it is doing is making sure that we're in the strongest position for this to be successful.
Thanks, Councillor O'Neill-Stephens. Councillor Skinner, then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you for that. Hey, thank you. I fully support option 1, and I appreciate the advice, and thank you for support support the advice given by officers on this, and the support to the community, as I should say. I have to say that I was rather disappointed at the badgering we seem to give the officers today, asking the same question over and over: why should we consult? This is not about risk or expediency. It's about common decency and proper decision making and respecting these neighbourhoods. We've gone out there for a trial, and I'm sure, and we've had a good response from it, and it was great. We consulted about the trial. And often there'll be people who say, hey, I'm happy to trial this. It may not mean that they're happy with what's being proposed, but giving a trial gives an opportunity for community to see how well it works. And this is why we must engage again before we go to the next step of putting it permanent or closing the street. Otherwise, we lose the respect of the community and the fear of ever going for trials, because they'll think, oh, they're having a trial, they're consulting that, but then they'll just go ahead with it as a predetermination. It's very important. This decision is quite different to a trial. We've had the trial. Yes, we had great feedback, a lot of support, which is good, but you still need to go back and listen to that neighbourhood on the pros and cons of it being permanent. And by all means, we may think we already know their answer, and maybe we do, but this is all about respect and proper decision making. So once again, I fully support this, and I was very disappointed that we just kept badgering to get a different answer from the staff for consultation. We make a lot of decisions at the table. Obviously, we can make without consultation. We do what we think is best, but this is actually affecting a neighbourhood, and this is about learnings from a trial. And by all means, we must consult on that, or at least engage. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Skinner. I've got Councillor Edgar, then Her Worship the Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to debate a little differently to how I normally do, because I don't normally respond directly to previous comments that councillors have made, but I will respond to proper decision making. And because proper decision making does involve understanding the legal requirements under which we are making a decision. Proper decision making also requires us to understand the process we are undertaking, the questions we are talking to the community about. It requires us to understand very clearly the difference between engagement and consultation. So there are a lot of elements of proper decision making that as a council we are required and need to turn our minds to. So I feel that we are undertaking proper decision making by testing these elements of the report and making sure that we are making proper decisions. There was also the comment about respect, and respect is listening to the community, absolutely. And at what point do you stop going back to the community and they go, we've already told you over and over again, when will you listen to us? Why are you coming back to us again when we have told you very clearly what we want? So respect might be defined differently by different people, but I feel that there's a point where we need to respect that people have talked to us and we need to hear it. So a number of previous speakers and in the questions keep using the phrase permanent closing. And this is not a permanent closure. And the point has been raised by officers that we haven't talked to the community about a permanent closure, and yet we still aren't, or we shouldn't be, because we cannot do a permanent closure and we are not seeking to do one. This is a long term, I'll get the exact words. This is a, can't find the exact words on my piece of paper, apologies, but it was just a further long-term closure, not a road stopping. So the community have been engaged on closure. The community have given us their views. We have data that backs that up. And previous speakers have said we can always change our mind. Well, are we going to say that in the engagement? That even if you really support long-term closure, we can always change our mind. It feels like I'm not sure what messaging we're trying to give to our community by what we're doing here. So I feel that we risk demonstrating that we haven't been listening, we're not looking at the data, over consulting. I'm sure we've got other things we need to be talking to the community about. And really, I feel that this could be considered quite rightfully disingenuous by the community. So we need to look at what the process is. We can consider always the community feedback on roading and footpaths, and we should always be doing that. And I believe our staff are always listening to the community. I believe our councillors are listening to the community and feeding that back. And so we shouldn't need a special process to do that. And for this decision, which is not a permanent closure, I don't believe we need to. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor. Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just endorse Councillor Egar's comments about the importance of understanding the legislation that we're using and the processes that we're using when we're making decisions. I think this has been a very slow process to get to this point for circumstances that are beyond council's control, like the last couple of years of COVID. We have had really good feedback from the community. I would be prepared to support this, but I think what I would like to see is clause 4 of the recommendation removed, because I am not confident about section 10 of the report, and I think that is going to tie the officers potentially up in knots, because we've got references to concept drawings and the time involved in doing those, I see the real value of engaging with the community. And actually, I like the idea of the community having a say in actually what that, what's going to happen in their neighbourhood. I think that's a really positive thing to do. But I just feel at the moment that that is quite prescriptive, and I think the officers need some flexibility to design the process as they see fit. They've now heard our debate, and I think we've been quite clear about that today, the issues that we think are important, that we think this is a really important project to get finalised, but we do want to take that step of going back to the community to say the process that the officers thought they would use when they started this is no longer appropriate. And I want us to be really clear about that. So I would not be happy to support this if we were going out to say to the community, you genuinely have an option in front of you of doing a permanent road closure, because we know that the officer advice says that would cause us major problems in terms of the services and all sorts of other factors. So I don't want the community to be offered something that they can't have. So if we're going to do that, and I can get that assurance through you, Mr. Chair, that that would be the process. We could check with the officers that they can't, that just wouldn't be a genuine choice on the table to do the road stopping process, but we would be using the section 3191F, which I think is entirely appropriate. Then I'm quite comfortable to allow for that communication to occur, because it is a change from what they've been told previously. I think it's at the very local government speak procedural stuff, but if it gives the officers the assurances that they need and what they need to get this project underway and finally get this completed, then I'm prepared to support it. But I can't support clause 4 in the recommendation. So
what I'll do is I'll just ask the advice of Mr. Hazardous if that would constrain or liberate the officers in the next stage.
Through the chair, I don't think there's anything that would prevent us from seeking what the committee wants if resolution 4 is removed.
Right. I'm the second. I'm happy to have it remove it as well. And Councillor O'Neill Stevens, you're the mover, so are you
More than happy.
okay? Well, with the consent of both the mover and the seconder, we will strike out resolution paragraph 4 of the resolution, or the proposed resolution. Don't worry about the amendment.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair. Would it be possible to just get consistency of wording in clause 5? So in clause 2, we talk about seeking the community views, and if we could just replicate that report summarising the community views on the proposal, will be brought back to a future committee decision.
Yes, that makes it's very logical.
We'd be happy with that, through the chair.
Okay, thank you.
Right, we'll just Kelsey, you just bring those minutes up so we know what we're looking at. Just pause for a moment. You happy that with Madam Mayor?
No, sorry, Mr. Chair, I think I've taken you down a rabbit hole because the clause 2 was that there is sufficient information available from feedback to enable the council to.
Yes, that's of the proposal to close, but the next one is determining the process that will be used to make it.
Yes, okay, that's
a
fine.
long term. So
Yep.
one is I've done the what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it.
How we're going to do it. That's fine. That's yes. I think we're okay. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Is there any other councillors wish to debate the matter? Otherwise, I'll put it.
I'll just quick.
Write a reply, Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Very quick write a reply. I just really want to acknowledge the opposition speakers to this and say that I almost entirely agree with what's been said. But I'd really ask councillors, for the sake of moving forward in what is a deeply imperfect, or what has been a deeply imperfect process, but to deliver a solid final outcome to support this. And I'd really ask staff, and I know that they are going to, but to take forward the learnings to enable us to, when we make these sorts of changes and when we trial these sorts of closures, to enable us to do so effectively and in a way that minimises their work while still maximising community benefit. And I think there's been some really solid learnings come out of this process that will enable in the future us to be able to move more nimbly and faster to respond to community concerns.
Yeah, thank you, Sir Neil Stevens. Okay, I'll put the resolution. That's as amended. Those who wish to vote, just use the green cross or the red, the green tick and the red cross. Carried 9-4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4 and 3 against. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. On to the next item on the agenda is the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit matter, pages 65 to 96. This is your report, Mr. Hazardous. I'll
Thank you through the chair. Yes, it is. Very, very brief. I'll take the report as read, and I have Mr. Nathan Clark as well as the chair of the Regional Landfill, Councillor Edgar here. I am required to bring the business plan for next year to this council for comment. Other than to say that I have attached Mr. Nathan Clark's report, and I am happy for Councillor Edgar to make some opening remarks, and then for Mr. Nathan Clark to answer any questions. So through the chair, I'll hand over to Councillor Edgar.
thanks, Mr. Levis. Councillor Edgar, as chair of the Landfill Business Unit, you've got some comments you wish to make?
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so firstly, I'll just briefly mention the fee increases. So you will have seen in 3.4 of the report that despite the resolution that it was 15%, the minutes clearly of the Landfill Business Unit meeting clearly reflect that it is to be 15%. And the key thing is, this is the figure that was consulted on in the long-term plan and that we received submissions on, and that was signed off as part of the long-term plan. So for the fees, there is no increase to that which we consulted. And we did receive submissions, and actually 21 out of 30 that mentioned the landfill supported the increase in fees. And actually there was only a couple of those who were just raised some concerns, but that was around consequences of fees. But one of the keys to remember is the increases in fees aren't, you know, that covers such things as the increased waste minimisation levy and increased emission costs. So just moving to the key changes in the business plan. So you'll see that it is mainly to do with our capital works program. And this is the reason that the business case came late to council, as approved by the board, was because we needed this piece of work to be done to look at leachates, our airspace and our land stability. And they're critical elements, they're probably the three most critical elements in the landfill. But in an overall picture for a 10-year period, by doing this work, we reduce our capital works program over the 10-year period. By doing this critical piece of work, we also reduce capital costs, operational costs that would come through. And that's critically important for us because the operational costs, as you know, is where the big increases come in. So we had a workshop in January. I know most councillors were able to attend just to go through some of the technical elements of the process we went through in determining the course of work that's in the Capital Works program. And then finally, before I hand to Nathan, it's just remembering, it does note it's 3.9 million in 2022-23 and 2 million in 2023-24. That, of course, is shared with Tasman District Council. So Nelson City Council only has a half contribution to that. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ika. Mr. Clark is the General Manager of the Landfill Business Unit. Anything you wish to add? Obviously not. No.
I think his mouth was moving. Nathan, we can't hear you. Can't hear you.
We'll just wait for him to come back.
I guess I could just comment on a couple of other matters that have been raised at other meetings, and Nathan can probably provide a more fulsome reply. But for now, just in regard to our emissions costs, one of the keys is we are seeking a real reduction in our carbon emissions rather than just looking at offsetting. You know, there's that, yes, you can, do things to, buy, plant, etc. to offset. But one of the key pieces of work we're doing is actually looking at those real reductions to emissions. And then that reduces the amount of purchase we have to do. We also have hedging in place to account for the extremely accelerating costs. But we already have hedging in place. And so we have sufficient buffer that for this year, we don't need any changes. But look, we continue to monitor the space, but we're also continuing in an even greater extent to look at what ways we can reduce our actual emissions. And the food waste trial will be another one as, that work comes through. So that work is done through Infrastructure Committee. So any questions on that we're in infrastructure, sorry Alec. Forgot what meeting I was at for a second. But yeah, so the key for us is looking at actually reducing our emissions.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Clark, you're back.
Can you hear me this time?
Yes, loud and clear.
Fantastic. Sorry, thank you. There's nothing that I think the report speaks for itself. I'm more than open to answering any questions from anybody.
Okay, thanks very much. I've got a Councillor Sanson, then Councillor Courtney.
Thanks, Brian. Kia ora, Nathan. Thanks very much for the report. So I'm just going to talk through the questions that I sent through. So starting with page 73, 6.2, it talks about diversion of some waste away for the York Valley Gully 1 landfill. So I'm just wondering if you could outline which wastes are being diverted away and where to.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, the intent of NTRLBU is to divert wastes that come to York where we can. There's two elements of the diversion. One is the diversion of essentially clean waste and hail and special waste that wouldn't accrue the ETS, and we are looking at opening up the Eves Valley Stage 2 landfill to accept those wastes. And part of the idea is to extend the life of York Valley or its airspace, but secondly to reduce the ETS liabilities that we have as a landfill. So the fact that those ETS things would not be going to a landfill that's accepting general waste would mean that we potentially don't have to pay a liability from the ETS perspective on them and reduce our overarching ETS emissions profile. The second piece of waste diversion is comes from a trial that we've been working on site, and that's basically trying to identify ways of segregating wastes that come to the York Valley landfill, and removing wastes that can be that we can reuse, such as any metals can go to metal recycling, or any in the past we've seen a lot of tantalized timber posts that are still large enough to be able to be used for other purposes, which we can resend them back off site. So there's a bunch of stuff that we're trying. Truthfully, we haven't been hugely successful with our trial to date with the segregation of waste at York Valley, but we are confident that we can divert a large portion of the hail and special waste to the Eves Valley site.
Thanks very much, Nathan. So just to follow up, the hail and special waste, is that is or isn't subject to ETS?
So under the ETS, the things that are covered by ETS are essentially anything that would contribute methane emissions from a landfill if it was disposed to the landfill. And so soil and concrete waste or other materials that won't break down and emit methane are not covered. We could send them to another facility and it would reduce the overall liability from York Valley.
And so when they go to Eves Valley, are they not landfilled? Like how are they dealt with at Eves Valley?
They are landfilled. It's just that the cost and the emission factor around the York Valley would change significantly. And the second thing is that the Eves Valley still has some residual capacity. The stage 2 of Eves Valley has some residual capacity in it. So we can use that, we can dispose that material. The material needs to be disposed in to landfills because hail material obviously has contaminants in it that would need to be taken out of public. So that does get disposed.
So actually we're not, so they're still going to landfill, but for some reason they're not subject to ETS penalties.
Correct.
And just out of interest, why? Like how come at York Valley they are and at Eves Valley they're not if they're both going to landfills?
So the ETS system basically says that ETS costs only accrue to landfills that accept general waste. Those landfills like clean fills that don't accept general waste don't incur the ETS liability. The second element of it is those landfills that accept general waste pay the MFE levy in 2 years' time. That'll be $60 a tonne. Whereas a clean fill or a class 2 or 3 landfill would only pay $20 a tonne. So shifting this material from York Valley would change the levy from $60 a tonne to $20 a tonne at the Eves Valley site. So it's about trying to make prudent financial choices on behalf of our users of the landfill.
Okay, thanks. And just one final question on this, kind of still on the same issue, just so I understand, is that when it goes to Eves Valley, that waste still emits carbon emissions? It doesn't.
No.
Okay, yeah,
that's a key fundamental component of this. The only waste that we can divert to Eves Valley must be waste that don't break down and emit carbon. Yep.
Thanks. I thought that's what you were trying to communicate, but I just want to make sure that's what I really understood clearly and for the community as well. Thanks. Page 73, 6.3, just talking about the gas wells. I'm assuming they capture gas. That's what they are for. And so are they actually, like, we're not actually decreasing the quantity of gas that's being emitted from the landfill, but simply capturing it and reusing it. Is that the case? So it's not actually reducing gas emissions from the landfill, it's just capturing those gas emissions?
So there's two aspects to that. The emissions from a landfill relate to how much methane gets emitted to the atmosphere. So we are intending to reduce the amount of methane that goes to the atmosphere. So at the present time, we have wells at 70-metre spacing, and the gap between the wells is too far for the suction pressure of our system to actually remove the gas. So we're wanting to double or halve the spacing between the wells, basically. By taking the methane out and burning it and turning it into CO2, we reduce the carbon the amount of greenhouse gas by 25 times. So methane is 25 times worse as a greenhouse gas than CO2. And so by removing it, burning it, and only emitting the CO2, we make a significant improvement in the emission that comes out of the landfill. Putting the gas wells in will allow us to not only capture more, suck harder, and essentially distribute the negative pressure of the suction across the landfill better, so we can get more gas into our capturing system, but it'll also obviously allow us to burn that gas and therefore reduce our ETS liability and our overarching emission profile. Yeah.
Thanks. And when we talk about burning it, we're not just burning it off, are we? It's actually being used to power things. Is that right? Like it's being used at the hospital, or is that correct?
Partially correct. So 25% of the gas is used at the hospital. Around the rest of the gas that we collect at the present time is being combusted in a flare. And so one of the things that the chair has been asking me is to look at other activities that might be able to be done with that gas. That's something that we've talked about. We haven't done a lot of work on that at this time. Our primary focus at this time has been focusing on actual emission reduction from both Eves Valley and York Valley landfill.
I mean, are you aware if that gas that's being flared, could it actually be captured for, I guess sold in gas bottles and that kind of thing? Like, if there was a business in Nelson that wanted to take that on and could work with, the landfill business unit, is that something that we would be open to?
Absolutely. From my perspective, that's definitely technically possible, and the board, or certainly the chair, has indicated that she would like us to look into those aspects. It's not something that we've undertaken a lot of work on. We have done some minor reports looking at the opportunity for doing some bottling of the gas. That comes with a number of fishhooks, because the ETS requires us to be able to clearly demonstrate that we destroyed the gas by, basically converted the methane into CO2. We have to be able to clearly demonstrate that. And if we took gas and bottled it and gave it to people for their barbecues, we'd have to potentially go out and test every barbecue that was used on and demonstrate the efficiency of that burning, which isn't really feasible in that context. So it does cause us some limitations on how small we can go in the use of the gas. There's a bunch of options that we have, from putting in gas engines for electricity production. There's we could feasibly we could put in a biogas cleanup station and use it for diesel, offsetting diesel in the community, or we could look at something like a hot pools facility as an example. There's a bunch of things that we could do that would all provide potential benefit. That also come across with a price tag associated with actually undertaking those. So
I guess there is the opportunity here for some community innovation, whether that's business sector or otherwise, to come up with some way that this gas could be utilised that met all the requirements, and it would actually mean that we're not just burning and emitting CO2 or converting the methane.
Yes.
Okay.
That is
totally
technically feasible. It's
hopefully somebody hears that and takes it up. It looks like a good opportunity. Thanks.
Any more questions?
Yep, I have. Sorry, I'll just quickly. So page 88, the emissions trading scheme line in the budget. I'm just wondering if you could just outline what the NZU rates are for each year per that budget used to calculate the budgets.
Yeah, so I could give you what we did in the AMP for that, but I don't propose to here, because what we've done in the AMP isn't. It was just an estimate for the future. The way we actually do our budgets is slightly different to that. What we do is we have a hedging policy for our ETS, and the ETS is actually quite complicated for us. We have three variables that act on us all the time. One is essentially what the emission factor per ton of waste is, right? So this year we might be paying 0.8 tons of of CO2 per tonne of waste coming into the landfill. That we also have what the price of these ETS units is. So when we did the AMP, the price was around about $37.50. The price currently is about $83. So there's a significant change in that over the intervening time. And the third one is obviously how much waste do we get into the landfill. So those three variables are significant for us. What we've chosen to do essentially is to change our Treasury policy. The board has adopted a revised Treasury policy, which basically allows us to buy forward 2 years worth of credits, so that we always hold, when we're doing our business plan, enough credits to be able to be certain what the price we paid for those credits is for the year, for that year that we're doing the thing. And that gets rid of one of those pieces of uncertainty. We know what the price for the business plan year is. We still have left the uncertainty around how much waste we get, and we still have some uncertainty around what our unique emission factor for the landfill is. However, what we've found over the last short while is that our unique emission factor has been, we've been slightly conservative with that, and we've been better than that. So even though the price of carbon has gone up, we've actually reduced our carbon discharge somewhat equally as fast as that. And so it's sort of balanced itself out largely. So,
and thanks, Nathan. And so does that mean that you're already hedged for the 22-23 financial year?
Correct, yes.
And so then I guess because we're being asked to sign off on this business plan, when we look at the 23-24, and then I'm assuming the next one's meant to be 24-25, well, that says 23-25.
I'm not being asked to sign off the business plan, Councillor Sansom, just being asked to provide feedback.
Yep.
What
was that question? What was that comment, Councillor McGee?
We're not being asked to sign off the business plan. We're being asked to provide feedback.
Okay, so my feedback would be that if I'm looking at this and I'm aware that these budgets have been based on an NZU rate of 35 or something, the current rate is 84, and the shadow rate that is being used by the government is at about $140 a unit for the future years. My feedback would be that I'm a little bit concerned that we're not really anticipating the emissions trading scheme liabilities that we're going to have facing the community, and thus the costs for the landfill. Thanks.
May I comment? Thank you for that. For us, what we have chosen, and in consultation with our board, is that we won't take a speculative position on carbon, but that what we will do is try to match the fact that we want certainty for our business planning for each business planning period. So we currently hold hedging for the 22-23 period and a little bit of the 23-24 period. And as we move through the 22-23, we will hedge for the 23-24 period. So we'll always hold enough to cover the next full year of our business planning process. We therefore know what the cost per unit will be for that year, and then we can set the fee to cover that cost. Now, what we aren't doing is buying forward 10 years worth of credits and saying, okay, we know what the cost is going to be for the next 10 years because we've already held them. And because one of the thoughts that the board had was that sort of undermined the intent of the national waste policy, which was to try to drive up the cost of waste disposal to enact reductions in waste disposal from consumers. And that by hedging forward 10 years, we would sort of undermine that. So that was part of the context of this, and we chose to only make sure that we could do conservative and careful business planning and reduce all of as much of the uncertainty around that as we could. So essentially, that's where our business policy has been. Yep.
Okay, that's really helpful, Nathan. Thanks so much for that additional explanation, and that absolutely makes sense. Cheers.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Clark, for your report and business plan that you've got before us. I've just got one particular question, and I'll have a little one if I can sneak it in, Mr. Chair, but it's on page 87. You touched briefly, very briefly, in answer to Councillor Sanson's question a minute ago, but I'm referring really to, first of all, 85, where you say, the NTR LBU is considering applying for the unique emissions factor for the landfill operations. But then on page 87, you go on to say that, in my judgment, you're saying that you're based on it anyway, your calculations, your budget is based on an emissions trading scheme factor. But why I'm asking the question on the next sentence is because I want you to expand on it. I think it'd be beneficial. Achieving the UEF factor possesses large financial risk, the largest financial risk for the NTR LBU for the 22-23 year. And the NTR LBU resources constrains increase in the likelihood of the risk occurring. Constrains increase. So would you expand on that, please? Because that's your major risk.
Yeah. So, thank you for that. And it's a pertinent question. The ETS, if we had not have done the work we've done over the last 2.5 years, the ETS would be costing us around $8 million a year. We've done the work that we've done, and we've reduced our UEF, which is our waste unique emission factor, over the last since 2018 from the default factor of 1.19 tonnes of CO2 per tonne of waste. And last year our unique emission factor was 0.885 tonnes of CO2 per tonne of waste. And when we wrote this report, we were trying to get some improvements into the landfill in terms of an improved gas flare and in some changes to the gas management. And that was the first part of the capital spend on the big reductions in ETS or carbon emissions. So we were worried that because of our reduced staffing, that we might not be able to enact some of the next section of those works, and we might not achieve a UEF factor at the level that we had assumed in the AMP, which was for this last year 0.75, and then the following year I think we go in 2022-23 at 0.5, which you can see in that same page. Thankfully, we received and got approved yesterday. I think I got the approval through a unique emission factor of 0.518 for the 2021 year. So we actually significantly exceeded what we were expecting to get. But it was, the problem with the UEF thing is that we do all this work during the year and we have no visibility at all on what the actual approved UEF factor will be until it's actually gone through the process in January of the next year. And because it counts for the entire year in arrears, if we get it wrong, there's a massive impact on the finances. There could be as much as a $4 million cost if we got it, if we went back to a unique emission factor. So for us, that is a really big factor in the overarching management of the landfill, and it has serious impacts on whether or not we can make these savings. What we have been doing is trying to be conservative on the assessments we've made for what that UEF is. We've been putting a lot of money and time and energy into driving down the emissions so that we can claim the UEF and get it better. And thankfully this last year we did a really good job, and we drove it down significantly from where it was previously. So that will result in improvements from an overarching budgetary perspective.
Congratulations. I have other questions, but there are other forums where I can ask those.
Yeah. We've been
Chair,
going.
I'm happy to move that receive this recommendation and provides feedback.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just Madam Mayor, you got a question?
I do. I just, Nathan, thank you very much for the reporting and answering questions today. I just want to come back to the capital program and really just test you a bit on that as the deliverability issues, particularly with COVID impacts, as to whether you think that's being overly optimistic in terms of what you can achieve.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I can't guarantee we'll achieve it, but at the same time, what we've been doing this year is spooling up our delivery capacity. So we don't have more staff in the regional services team yet. We are asking for we're looking at some restructuring to see if we can get some more capacity there. What we have, however, done is engaged a number of supporting organisations around us, in particular DS projects, to help us to deliver the capital program for us. And so they have come on board already, and we've put in program in place to develop that and implement that works. Because of the way that a big portion of our works is related to the airspace and the leachate improvements, we had allowed a small amount of money in the 21-22 year, and that's allowed us to actually start some of that work early. And that basically means we've already spilled up and are starting into that now, so that when we hit July the 1st, we should be in a position to keep going, quite quickly with that work. So overarching, I think there are a few minor odds and sods that might not get done. The bulk of it, I believe, we'll get through. Yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. I'll just take the opportunity to speak to it now, if that's right, Mr. Chair, just to support obviously the receiving of the report, and you've received some feedback today. And I just want to really acknowledge the quality of work that we're seeing here. It's occasions like this where you go through some big regional decisions, establishing the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit. It was quite a process to do it. And when I see the work that's coming forward today, just to you, the chair, and to Nathan and your team, I can really see the value of those decisions, and just really appreciate the work that you're doing, and the really good strategic thinking that I'm seeing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right. I'm about to take a break. Okay, but it's been moved. Both the recommendations been moved by Councillor Skinner. Someone to second?
I'll second that.
Councillor Courtney. Any debate or discussion? There being none, I'll put it. Those in favour, please just indicate with the green tick or the red cross. One, two, three. Yep, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We've been going for an hour and 6 minutes, so we will take a break, 2-minute break. We'll come back at 11:35. Very quick, just have a bit of a stretch. And so 11:35 sharp.
What time did we say we were going back, Brian?
11:35. So
Oh, yeah, there we go.
now's the hour. Hi, Karen. You all ready?
Yes, thanks, Brian.
Wondered if you were going to burst into song there, Brian.
No. My singing voice is usually is more songbirdish after a few beers and late at night on a karaoke machine. Okay.
Apparently it was New Zealand's first million-selling song.
Rightio, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Still waiting for a couple more. 7, 8. Okay, we're enough for a quorum, so let's get back underway. Next item on the agenda is our submission to the Ministry for the Environment, taking responsibility for our waste and proposals for the waste strategy, issues and options for new waste legislation, pages 97 to 113 in your agenda. It's actually written by Karen Lee, and Karen is here. Karen will take the report as read. Very good report, a most excellent submission, but there may be some matters you wish to highlight or add or amplify for the benefit of elected members, and we'll open for questions. But if you just give a summary, basically talk, the high points of the report, the submission, and yeah, that would be very useful.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, if I may just introduce that. I haven't asked Karen to prepare that. So, so yes, you're right. It does just seek retrospective approval of that, of the submission that we've made to the Ministry of the Environment regarding the new national waste strategy. It proposes, in general, it's a green paper at central government level to move New Zealand more toward a low waste society and a more circular economy. As you've suggested, we take it as read. The submission does, however, broadly endorse that of Waste Mins, which is the Officers Forum for Waste across local government. It was developed with input from other council and certainly alongside Tasman District Council, and is well aligned to the joint waste minimisation plan that we hold with them. I have to acknowledge specifically Karen, who did author the report. It has in it both those endorsements I mentioned earlier, but also some points for consideration, particularly around locally. We feel there should be more of a focus on reducing waste, not just about the management of it. So our submission does ask for more focus on reduction of waste, and also some comments about the need for extra resourcing at a local government level. So if these proposals are enabled, they will require more resource at local government, and we feel that needs more investigation at central government level. So Karen, I have to acknowledge her. She did the work on this, and she is here to take specific questions.
Oh, thanks very much, Mrs. Parfitt. Thanks for introducing the item. So opportunity for any questions. There being none. Oh, okay, we've got Councillor Edgar, then Councillor Courtney.
Sorry, I really just wanted to move the resolution and really acknowledge a great submission.
Happy to second that and echo those sentiments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Edgar, seconded Councillor Skinner, but Councillor Courtney, you've got a question?
Yes, I have. It may be difficult for Karen to answer, but I want to say, does she foresee a lead role for local government in this legislation, this proposal that's being worked on by central government? Because it seems to me as though what's required will be a lot of work actually at the coalface, which is in the community. So do you see our role, a predominant role for us at local level?
Through the chair. I think throughout the consultation document, they made it clear that a significant amount of work needs to happen to answer that particular question. And we have really reinforced this in our submission and in discussion with other councils preparing submissions, that there is a lot of detail to be clarified around the systems that are adopted and specifically the roles of local government. I think that's very far from a complete conversation. This is just the start.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. When I look in our blue bag that goes out to the curb once every, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes 2 weeks, most of it is soft plastic, which I find really frustrating for lots of reasons, but largely because for a while we had a soft plastic recycling scheme in Nelson. And I understand why many environmentalists are opposed to soft plastic recycling because it kind of enables manufacturers to keep putting soft plastic into the world. But what do you see as the future in terms of soft plastic recycling in Nelson? I haven't seen anything in here about soft plastic recycling specifically. I might have missed it, but I would be interested to get your thoughts.
Through the chair, the submission wasn't going down to the level of those specific waste streams. The point of the new legislation and the strategy is to give better direction and tools to address problems like those. Future schemes like product stewardship are going to have a really important role to play. So I think really I can't answer that question for you immediately, other than obviously to assure you that we're remaining in the meantime in touch with the scheme providers and strongly encouraging them to renew the scheme in Nelson whilst we're waiting for better tools.
Okay, thanks. Just since we're on it, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, Karen, do you think there's any chance that we will see it starting again in Nelson in the foreseeable future, like this year?
That's not a question I can answer,
okay,
unfortunately.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions? Okay, well, thanks very much. I really would like to acknowledge it was, Councillor Fulton, you're waving your hand for something.
I'd like to ask a question.
Oh, right. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Thanks. Councillor McGurk, and Karen, and Mark, thanks for presenting this report. It's an excellent submission. I just have a question around paragraph 12, page 107 of the agenda, around the strong support for focusing on keeping organics and construction and demolition waste out of landfill. Do you have a feeling in terms of whether central government might regulate that organics can't go into landfill into the future?
Through the chair, again, that's a question that's very difficult to answer at this point, because the government needs to establish this new strategy and the tools that it's going to develop as a result of that before it can really formulate its final decisions. I think it's widely acknowledged that organic waste plays an important role in achieving climate change reduction, and hence the close links with waste. But I can't give you a definitive answer on that at this stage.
Could we have submitted that that's our preference, that central government shows leadership in regulating around this?
I think through the chair, I think across our whole submission, it's implicit that we are very, very supportive of all actions that lead to climate change emission reduction.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thanks very much, Karen. It was a really well written, well thought out, and comprehensive submission. I'm very pleased to put my signature on behalf of the committee and council. So it's been moved by Councillor Edgar, seconded by Councillor Skinner. Those in favour, please press the green cross. Those opposed, the red. Right, I think that's everybody. It's passed unanimously. Thank you very much for your support for that one.
Thank you.
Next item, and yeah, great job, thanks. Next one is the fees and charges. This is pages, I think, 14 to 119 in your agenda. I think this is your report, Mr. Levertis. Is it? Or was it no, Mrs.
Through the chair,
Parfitt,
it's,
sorry.
Ms. Parfitt, yeah.
Yeah, Mrs. Parfitt. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Each year we bring you a report to approve any changes to charges, fees and charges in the infrastructure area. So this report identifies charges other than those that are CPI related. And today you'll see that there are only changes around the solid waste area. So utilities and roading are CPI only. This report asks for a number of increases that will assist in cost recovery for our waste operation exercise, particularly at the Waste Recovery Centre in Vivian Street, commonly known as the Transfer Station or Pascoe Street. The first is a 15% increase in fees for refuse, and that is simply a knock-on effect of the increased charges at York Valley Regional Landfill, which you discussed in an earlier report. The second is 10% increase in green waste. So the green waste contract was extended so that we could have potentially better alignment with green waste and potential food waste collection or processing service. And any contract extension often results in increased charges. So that's what that one's about. It's a 10% increase to recover costs that would be incurred at the Waste Recovery Centre. And the third one, the hazardous waste material one, is really a good news story, because what this shows us is that we're keeping hazardous material out of landfill, but the quantities coming through the Waste Recovery Centre at Tahunanui have gone up a lot through increased awareness through our education campaigns, some increased training of our kiosk staff, but our cost in then appropriately disposing of that hazardous material is exceeding what we currently have budgeted. So we are asking for an increase in fees there to assist with cost recovery. It won't go all the way, but it perhaps is something that council should be subsidising to keep that stuff out of landfill. So those are the proposed increases as per the attachment for your consideration.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Parfitt. Opportunity to ask any questions of the officers. Yeah, Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mark, Officer Parfitt, for this. So these increases are essentially to ensure that we continue, just confirm this for me, please, our user pay approach to the disposal of this material. Is that right? Green waste and the others?
Essentially, that is correct. The only one that is not going to be fully user pays would be the hazardous waste one, unless we put those fees up significantly more than what we're proposing. But as I said, the benefit is that we're keeping that stuff out of landfill, but the rest of it is about cost recovery.
And it does that completely by these 10 and 15% increases?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do have to just, there is a cost in running the transfer station that comes from the waste levy. The gate charges go toward offsetting the costs that we have in managing this material. Good. They don't fully cover it. They don't fully cover it.
I see.
The waste levy makes up the difference. The local disposal.
Thank you.
That's right. Okay, Councillor Sanson, your turn.
Thanks very much. I was actually just going to move it, which I'm happy to do, but I'm just following up from Margie. Are you able to give us an indication of what kind of percentage the waste levy contributes towards the costs? If the gate charges are a certain percentage and the waste levy is the balance? Do you any idea?
Through the chair, off the top of my head, I don't have that figure, but I can certainly get it back to you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. Just I thought it might be.
It will be in the activity management plan, but I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah, and it's just helpful for the community to understand that, you know, the increases we're making are necessary and that it's, you know, it's only on a kind of cost recovery or not even basis.
Absolutely. We can reassure the community that there's no profit involved in this.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm happy to move it.
Okay, taking a move. No more questions. Someone to second? Yeah, Councillor Neil Stevens. Any debate or discussion? There be none. We'll put the resolution as it is in the as in the agenda. Those in favour, just please press your green tick. Carried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4. No, 10 for, 2 against. Recommendation. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, the last item I've got in the open session is the infrastructure quarterly report. Always looking forward to receiving this one. I think this is your report, Mr. Levertis, but I think Lois, Ms. Plum and Mrs. Parvin and Mr. Light are there to assist.
Indeed, and I'll hand over through the chair to Lois, who always leads this off, and then we'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Through the chair, this is the report for the quarter ending in December. That's sort of long time ago when we actually had a break. And we have done some updates through to the time of actually getting the report to you. I can confirm, and I'm very pleased to say, that our largest projects are continuing to move forward in a timely manner, with teams juggling the impacts of product delays and COVID impacts as well, better than I could have hoped for, actually. Section 4 has moved across the road just this week, and it's now working on the seaside of Main Road Stoke, and that's the section that brings the bulk of the complexity to the project. So it will be some interesting times moving forward with that one. Both utilities teams have been impacted by the recent rain events, with having to work lots of after hours and weekends, etc., and keeping the daily services running and juggling resources issues. It does contribute to the level of workload that our teams are having to manage. Resourcing issues are not actually unique to us. We're seeing that in our contractors and our consultants, that everybody is struggling to recruit, and we're expecting some impacts to our work as a result of the inevitable COVID increase and surge. I can confirm, however, and we've done lots of checks, that everyone is doing their best to be as resilient as possible. And certainly some are doing some red and blue teams as such. Many of our consultants are working from home, but if someone goes down, it's very difficult to fill those gaps just at the moment. We're requesting some funding in this report to be brought forward from next year to allow Awatea to continue in this financial year. It's slightly tracking ahead of schedule, which we're very pleased with, along with confirming some funding for the Rutherford Street stormwater project, and that will just allow us to award tender. We're just working our way through that at the moment, and allow us to purchase products as quickly as possible to reduce any likelihood of delay going forward. That was all I wanted to highlight today, and as Mr. Levertis indicated, we're happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Great. I always love hearing your report update. Thanks, Lois. Okay, opportunity for questions. I've got Councillor Sanson and then Councillor Courtney.
Thanks very much, Brian. Kia ora, Lois. Thanks for the report. So I've just got 2 questions. First one, page 140, 13.1, where it's referring to nurseries and planting contractors have raised concerns in terms of meeting forward future work due to the higher requirement across all sectors for plants. I'm just wondering what that relates to. Is it related to parks and reserves planting or something else?
Through the chair, I can answer that. Also, most of our jobs, a lot of our work, when we are starting to dig up land and doing the things that we have to do, we have to reinstate, and often that reinstatement is, we have a planting requirement also. And we are aware through working with the nurseries that after the original COVID increase in infrastructure projects, planting, just all the plants disappeared, and they weren't actually expecting the level of infrastructure activity that was going to get underway. So plants are a high commodity item at this time.
Thanks. So it's kind of landscaping, planting around infrastructure projects.
Correct.
Yeah. Thanks. And does NELMAC grow a lot of the plants that council utilises through their nursery?
Through the chair, yes, they do. And we use those as well as others if required.
Thanks. And then the last question is just a super quick one on page 161, talking about the Nelson Wastewater Treatment Plant Resource Consent Renewal. It's got an acronym, BPO, and I just wondered if that was something like base permissible outflow or something. What does BPO mean?
I can answer that one. Kia ora, through the
David.
chair, that means best practicable option.
Oh, so the process will establish the best practicable option for the treatment and discharge of wastewater from the Nelson region. Okay, and is it possible that it could throw up options other than renewing the consent for the Nelson Wastewater Treatment Plant?
I would say that the options will most likely be the consent will be renewed, but within the new consent there may be conditions applied that require a certain amount of upgrades.
Okay, and so do you think one of the conditions could be that we're treating the discharge to I think it's a tertiary stage? We treat to a secondary level, don't we? Is that right?
Yeah, that we expect that there could be some extra expectations that we may need to potentially improve the quality of our discharge. So we haven't yet narrowed down that BPO, but there could be an expectation that we do improve some additional treatment in our discharge quality.
Okay. And is that determined at a national level or in consultation with iwi?
Yeah, it'll be.
Where does that kind of requirement come from?
So it's part of a resource consent process that you have to go through the best practical option. So that's a standard process that we work through. So we follow that process.
Considering all regulation, national standards and engagement with stakeholders. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much. No further questions.
Councillor Courtney, your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Officer Plum, for this excellent quarterly report. I'm interested, curious in fact, on page 133, the Maitai Dam Lindabyra testing has been completed. And I want to know what work streams are going to flow from this testing that's been done, please.
So through the chair, that project is linked with obviously the Maitai Dam Aeration project. So we've been made aware that there is Lindavia within the Maitai Dam. So the testing that we've been doing was trying to help better understand that aspect of it and what impact that may or may not have with the potential aeration project that's underway. So it was there was 3 waters funding that was made available through the stimulus program, and we utilized some of that funding to help with additional testing to help quantify some aspects of that.
So Lindabyra, thank you for that. So Lindabyra is there, and I'm sort of wanting you to advise me as to whether or how we're going to manage that. Will it require ongoing budgetary provisions to manage it, or can we completely eliminate it?
So this is probably more of an environment question for that committee side of it. From an infrastructure perspective, at the moment it's not blooming, so it's not an issue at the moment. There are potential scenarios that could make that bloom. But we've gone through hot, dry periods at the moment, and we haven't had an issue with it. So it's not causing us a problem yet. But there is a potential for that to happen at some, depending if the right circumstances come to light. So at the moment, it's no issues. It's mostly just a monitoring process. From an operational side, which would be the water treatment plant, we would be needing to put in more screens and possibly more operation and maintenance to manage a potential bloom there.
Will we think through you, Mr. Chair, will we at governance level be receiving a report on this?
It's probably something that Claire Barton and the team would probably need to work through. Alex got his hand raised.
You able to respond, Mr. Levitis?
So through the chair, the only thing that I can say is the reason that it's in this quarterly report is to bring to the committee and to the council's attention that there is this in the dam water, and then from an operational point of view that we are monitoring it and we're working very, very closely with Claire's team, and that our focus is to make sure that it doesn't have any effect on the high spec downstream equipment that we have, for example, the water treatment plant. So to answer Councillor Courtney's questions, it's here for the very point that we do not want to lose sight of it, and this is the mechanism that we report back. And I think from memory, and maybe the chair of the Environment Committee can advise, but I think there is an item that Claire Barton reports back through that committee. I apologize if I'm incorrect, but I think that she does. But the fact that it's in our report is to alert and keep this committee updated so we do not lose sight of that.
Thank you very much. And I have one further question, but well, I'll limit to one further question, and that's 12.11 on 137. Solar compacting bins will be installed in the city centre in March and April of this year. And I'm just wondering how many of those are being installed, which is tremendous news as far as as far as the community is concerned, I'm sure. And so some further information on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Certainly, through the chair, I can't give you the exact number, but we will be, I thought we had updated councillors through a councillor newsletter, but it does involve a slight rationalisation of our current on-street litter bins in the central city, but the placement of it has been worked through with certainly the city centre development team, Mr. Gray, and so there will be certainly sufficient to be placed around the city centre. They're going to be wrapped with some artistic wrap, and the concrete pads are being poured, I think, as we speak, so we're just waiting for the bins to arrive. I can't give you the exact number, but I can get back to you on that.
Mark, I understand they're self-compacting, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They have a solar power source, and so a big arm comes down and squashes the litter, and the benefit of this is that we won't have to collect from them daily. At the moment, we collect daily, in fact, twice daily at the peak of the season, but this will reduce that by up to 70%, I think. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, which reduces the trucks movement through the city centre. We are going out for a street litter contract very shortly, and we'll be looking for things like EVs to do that. So the whole waste collection is moving to a more sustainable platform.
Mark, just to finish off, Mr. Chair, are we hiring them or are we buying them?
Through the chair, we are leasing these at this stage. So there are some advantages in that, and with regard to ongoing maintenance and servicing. They may in fact come down in price as this technology is more widely adopted across the country, but lease was the better option at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Courtney. Your Worship, and then Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just got a couple of topics. The first one is, I'm just in light of the article that was in the newspaper about the preparatory work that Tasman District Council was doing around water fluoridation. I just wondered if we've done any preparatory work around assessing the cost of enabling water fluoridation.
probably a question for Mr. Hazardous, or
So through the chair, yes, we have yes, we are working on that. The submission deadline for that is the 11th of March, and we are we're just finalizing what we think is happening there. From our analysis, that we're probably seeing a capital cost potentially in the order of about 500,000 that's the capital side of it. And then operation and maintenance, we're at this stage, we're seeing it run about 100,000 per annum. So, but we're still doing a few checks and balances on those things, but that's where we currently see those costs potentially sitting at.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's something I think we just need to be mindful of if we're going to be directed to introduce fluoride. The second one is, Ella, just wondering if you could give us an update on how the Pride crossing's going.
Through the chair, I will be presenting a report to the Infrastructure Committee on the 31st of March, and I'm busy working on that report.
Thank you.
Thanks. You're done. Councillor Fulton.
Thanks, Councillor McGurk. Look, I just had a couple of questions regarding the solar compacting bins. Can you remind me what the budget line is for that for 10 years? I think it's a 10-year line item for in our long-term plan.
I'm sorry, through the chair, I don't have that figure at my fingertips at the moment.
Okay. I just recall it being quite a significant amount, maybe 160,000 a year or something. And I'm just curious, when you were looking at that as a waste alternative and streamlining waste, did you look at collecting organics and composting them as part of that strategy in terms of diverting organics from landfill?
Through the chair, these bins are specific to the city centre street litter.
Yep.
And so, no, we didn't. The bins will be of such a design that previously we've had a lot of contamination in our inner city recycling bins, and I think these bins will eliminate that. There is more information coming on this through the councillor's newsletter, and I think that's probably the
okay.
I guess of me not being well prepared for the question. I would rather
it would be really helpful if I could get some feedback on that. I think I have asked in the past, and I asked through the climate action plan as well, is that if we are serious about diverting organics from landfill, then as a city we could in fact be zero waste and encourage all our cafes. Most of our waste probably in the CBD is food waste or food packaging, and if we had all of our takeaways in compostable takeaway containers, we could actually be diverting a lot of waste from landfill. So if you could maybe follow up on that and come back to me, if that could be part of that waste minimisation within the CBD, I think it would be really, really great to be walking the talk. Thanks.
Any other questions? Just a quick one from me. Just in paragraph 7.4, the Wozni Terrace, been a bit of a delay. Is there any requirement, any necessity to change the timing or the budget timing for that particular project in light of what we've done with the other two? Or are we still on track to get it done within this current financial year and within budget?
Through the chair, the funding that is identified in this financial year still seems to be accurate. So we are moving ahead on the basis that we're on track. Great, thanks very much.
Okay, no more questions. I'm happy to move the recommendation, including the bringing forward the Awatea Place waste report. I know that Councillor Neil Stevens and I have been dealing. It's a big project if you get the opportunity, and also bringing forward the Rutherford Street so they can get that out to tender in a timely manner. So, Councillor Sanson, are you seconding or question? Second, Councillor Sanson. Any debate or discussion? There being none, I'll put the recommendation as an agenda that received the report, approve the capital funding for Awatea Place and the unbudgeted additional capital funding for Rutherford Street Stormwater. Please press the green tick in favour and the red cross if you're opposed. Still waiting for a couple more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think that is everybody. Yeah, thanks. Passed unanimously. Motion is carried. Right, the last item on the agenda is in public excluded, so that's in a separate agenda. So I have someone to move that we move into public excluded. This is for the purpose of the status report, a relatively minor matter, but does need to be dealt with in public. Who's moved that?
Kate.
Councillor Edgar, seconded Councillor O'Neill Stevens. Those in favour of moving in public excluded, and indicate with a green cross. Carried. Okay, we're now in public excluded. We'll give it an opportunity to do what we need to do. And while we're waiting, just confirmation, I should have done this earlier.
Thank you, youth councillors.
I'll let them